Welcome to today's webinar on SAP BW for HANA. We're joined today by John Appleby, SVP of Global Sales for Bluefin Solutions, and he's joining us from Philadelphia. And we're also joined today by Jan van Ansem, Bluefin's Data Warehouse Specialist. One thing to mention is that you will see a question box on your GoToWebinar control panel. We'll have plenty of time for questions at the end of the webinar, so we really encourage you to write any questions you have throughout the webinar, and we'll endeavour to answer as many of them as possible when we get to the end. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to John Appleby.
Hey Chloe, thanks so much for the introduction. You sounded so British there as well. That's great. Excuse my voice a little bit. I'm a little bit croaky today, so I've got a cup of tea that's going to keep me going for the hour. And I'm just going to take you through real quickly what we're going to be running through today on our agenda. It's pretty simple. So we're going to tell you a little bit about what SAP BW for HANA is. What is it and how does it work? How is it different to the SAP BW on HANA project or platform? Then I'm going to walk through how you can build that into your roadmap. So how do you actually get this to work in a practical sense? How do you get moving? And especially if you're a SAP BW customer today, there's the best part of 20,000 of those by now. If you're one of those 20,000, how do you approach this? How do you move into the new world? Then my colleague Jan is going to come along and tell us a little bit about a customer of ours, Noble Drilling, who did an early pilot of BW for HANA, and Jan is actually doing that from another customer today, where he's working on a deployment of BW for HANA. So he's got some real-world experiences there, and will therefore be fielding all the questions. Just kidding, yeah. Then I'm going to finish up with telling you how at Bluefin, how do we approach a BW for HANA project? What's our approach to building a roadmap for that and getting started? So with no more ado, let's jump right into the content. Great. So I think going back to where BW for HANA started, and I think we first had the conversations with SAP around it. I don't know if it was almost 2 years ago, and I think what they'd realized was that they'd built this S/4HANA product and platform, and when they'd done that, I think there was an imagination that there would no longer be a need for a data warehouse, that the ERP system would be the single system of truth, and therefore BW would be dead. And I remember kind of famously, Vishal Sikar at the time stood up in front of the Asian sales force and told all of them that BW was done. And I think what they came to realize a little while later on was that what S/4HANA does is it precludes the need for operational reporting. And what happened in the mid-90s was the early R3 systems were built for ERP processing, and they weren't able to run operational reports as the size increased. And that's part of the reason why BW came into existence around 1998. BW 1.0, for those of you that have been around as long as I have. But it was only part of the reason. And so what they found then with S/4HANA was that whilst you can move that operational reporting back into the core transactional system, and actually you can do much better than that. You can build operational reporting into the transactions, into the Fiori screens. Whilst that's one use case for analytics, there's also still a need for a data warehouse. And so they found themselves having really modernized the core ERP and built, a second generation or fourth generation, however you count it, ERP. They hadn't done the same for the data warehouse. And whilst the BW team had done a fine job of modernizing BW, it had been left with an awful lot of options, an awful lot of legacy objects, and an awful lot of complexity, which was stopping them from really building something that would work in the wider market. And so we talked long about a product that might be called BW for HANA or DW, Data Warehouse for HANA, or a number of things, and it became clear that there was really a need for a second generation data warehouse based upon the HANA platform, and we came up with kind of four core principles for that, which have made the product what it is today. And one is that it should be a single source of truth, and unlike the BW system, which has up to 7 layers of the layered scalable architecture, there should be only one data persistence layer. So, okay, sure, you might be replicating our data out of ERP, and you might be replicating it out of other systems like JD Edwards, or even we've got customers replicating out of Teradata and things like that. But it's then held in one persistence layer. Now, of course, above that, we have to do harmonization and all of that good stuff of the layered scalable architecture. But we do that in a logical manner and not a physical manner. So when we talk about data simplicity, that's what we mean. The second is honestly, I think this has been a challenge since the Business Objects acquisition, really, because when SAP acquired Bob J in 2008, that they really stopped focusing on the user experience of the BW tools. And whilst there are those of us that know and love Beck's Analyzer and Beck's Query Designer, the reality is those tools haven't really been modernized in 10 years now, since the release of NetWeaver 7, NetWeaver BI 7, as it was called back then. So there's a need for a modern user interface that kind of maps how data model is used today, and is much more alike to what other software companies are using for data modeling, for data warehousing. So BW for HANA brings that with its Eclipse modeler, and not just for modelers, for administrators and runtime users. You're not going to be needing the BEX tools, and in many cases, you're not going to be needing the SAP GUI tools. So that's the second point. The third point was, data warehouse has to be open, and I think if you look at the challenges that existed within the SAP BW platform, it had difficulties with its openness. There were ways with UD Connect and JD Connect and flat file data sources to get data into BW, or even using data services, but it wasn't really designed to be open. It was designed to be a data warehouse for SAP data, and BW for HANA is absolutely designed to be a data warehouse for all data. It treats all data equally. It has great integration with things like smart data integration to get data into the BW platform in straightforward ways. And the last, and I kind of think of this as being, really just the basics for a modern data warehouse. It should provide the performance that you'd expect with SAP HANA. I think anything less would be a fail. But despite the fact that you've got simplicity and a good user interface, and it brings data from all sources, you shouldn't have this issue that you have with other data federation software, SAP's Data Federator suffered from similar problems where you get these, but you suffer performance because of that. So you get all of this and you have performance. So those are the four kind of principles of the BW for HANA product. We're now going to step on and talk about what's new in BW for HANA. I think some of which we've kind of got through, but I'm going to kind of give a view of the things that we think are making a difference. Again, it's just simply a price of entry for something like this, but it's kind of a good point probably to segue. Some of you might be thinking, why is SAP building a product on top of the HANA platform when HANA is a database, and it is therefore it can be a data warehouse? And I think the point is quite simple, which is, whilst HANA is a fantastic database and includes a lot of native data warehousing capabilities within it, it is not a data management platform. It's not a master data management platform. It doesn't manage deltas and data loads and process chains and all of the things which make a data warehouse self-sustaining. So whilst BW for HANA should provide those, what it should also provide is all of the raw power of HANA. So not just utilizing HANA as a database, but really getting deep into the core of the column store engine, being able to run complex aggregations in memory, and pushing everything down from the application layer. And that's something that if you run BW on HANA, BW on another database, you simply don't get. Everything gets pulled up into the application layer and gets processed within there. With BW for HANA, you can expect for complex exception aggregations, for hierarchies. You can expect for non-cumulatives and really complex calculations. You can expect that all to run in memory. So the second point is, there's an understanding that not all data is, but perhaps at some stage all data is created equal, but all data does not age equally. And so there's a need to manage data temperature in order of the value of the data. So with SAP HANA Vora and the IQ or dynamic tiering, there's the ability to manage multi-temperate data according to a set of criteria. So you can say this year's hot, or this year, last year's hot, and previous stuff is cool. You can say that these company codes are hot and these company codes are cool. So that's feature number 2. Feature number 3, we integrate with data sources and engines. So we are able to integrate directly into either S4HANA or Suite on HANA, and in the future, the vision is actually you won't replicate data out of S4HANA into BW for HANA. It will be purely logical data warehouse for other HANA databases, which is pretty cool. Not there yet, but that's the vision. We've already talked about the Eclipse-based HANA Studio. That's there today, and and Jan will talk to that. But there in the project he's doing, I know that Bex is a thing of the past. In the one dinner, we were making jokes about Brexit, but probably not that funny now. Simplification and reduced number of modeling objects. This is both a wonderful thing and also from an implementation point of view is a fun challenge. So, and we'll walk through some of these, but there are now only 4 objects. Let me see if I can remember what they are. So we're down to ADSOs, I'll wait until it comes up. But in essence, an awful lot of legacy objects which are not required in BW on HANA are deprecated in BW for HANA. They're gone, so you can't use info providers, for example. And the last thing is the goal was to be cloud first, and SAP happened to partner with Amazon Web Services for this. So you can spin up a BW for HANA system of any size within AWS, and you don't have to worry about the installation and deployment. Their CloudFormation scripts will do that for you, and will build you out a system in a few minutes. We had some fun with that a little while back, and built out some massive systems. And what we found was that really the size of it is limited largely by your available number of hosts within Amazon, and which they limit on the big systems by default. You have to ask for an exception, and the size of your pocketbook. So I think we built out a 100-node system for giggles. So that's kind of an overview of what's new, and feel free to ask questions. Let's get on into why. So in terms of why considering BW for HANA, I mean, I always like, and it's the name of my blog if you Google it, I like to think of things in terms of people, process, and technology. For me, the key to the key to really technology adoption is for a product to hit all of these. And well, this is a busy slide, but what we found was, and you can read this slide, but I'll kind of speak to the things I think really are important. Is that the user experience, not just in terms of the visual user experience, but in terms of how people interact with the data is improved. I'm a BW user and I'm a Power user, so I can write my own queries to get what I want within the data models, or maybe even augment the data models. But the reality is that your average business user that uses BW doesn't have that. And that's just simply not true with BW for HANA. You build these fat models, and you can give business users access with analysis for Office or Lumira. You can give access deep into the data model to do analysis. And it's analysis that businesses just wouldn't allow folks to do on BW because it crashed the system. So if we're talking about not just structured reporting, but the need to be able to actually do proper analysis within the platform, because you create these models which are able to be updated with calculated columns quickly, more than process, it really improves the people's ability to actually get the data they want, which means that they stop building these secondary data marts and they stop building these secondary data warehouses in Excel or Tableau or Teradata. And that means you can trust the data. On the process side, for me, all of these things are true, but the thing I would pick out is the ability to be agile in a good way. So typically the problem with a data warehouse is you balance off change management and agility. So somebody puts in a change request, like I want this field to be available within the data model, and that goes into change management process, and quite often times, I'm afraid, it comes out 6 months later, by which time the business user either A, forgot about the requirement and it isn't a need because it was a need at that point in time, or worse, B, went and built another data model that did what they wanted. And you've got an alternative, which is to process these change requests quickly, but that brings a platform stability issue, which is no better. Now, the great thing with BW for HANA is if you want another field where you don't have to do it in 7 different places and replicate the data up and manage the data loads and reconcile, you can just add a data. You can just add a calculated column and verify that the data is right, and it rolls right up through the model. So from a process perspective, you can have both change management and agility, which is cool. And I think from a tech perspective, the thing I pick out, actually perhaps more than it's really the third point, which is the reduction side. Because you're holding one set of data, you're not just getting this promised HANA compression, you're getting way more than that. Because in most BW systems, you've got a PSA, you've got 2 DSOs, you've got at least 1 info cube, you've got 4 or even 5 duplicates of much the same data. That's 5-to-1 compression. You add to that HANA 5-to-1 compression, and we're seeing 20, 30 times compression compared to other databases. And that reduction in data size, it just makes a huge difference to how you manage the cost of backups, the cost of ownership, and all the data management associated with a BW platform. All right, so with that in mind, I'm going to get straight on into the building BW HANA, BW for HANA, into your roadmap. So how, suppose you like the sound of all of this, how do you approach this? And I think the first thing I would say is, look, if you're a new customer or you don't have a BW system, don't even think of doing anything other than BW for HANA. Like, it shouldn't even be a question. You shouldn't be evaluating BW for HANA versus BW on any DB if you're starting a project now. And you'll see why in a moment. Whilst it's an early product, I mean, it's been out for like 4 or 5 months now. It's based upon the BW on HANA product, and the release 0 on it was basically the BW on HANA product with a load of stuff removed and some new functionality. The first thing that they focused on was A, releasing a product, and B, removing all of the stuff that people don't need in a reimagined data warehouse, so that they had a clean code platform to build upon. So now, if you're an existing customer, it's a little bit more subtle, because this sort of gray functional conversion box looks suitably nebulous. But one thing's for sure, if you are either on BW on any DB or on BW on HANA, you need to move to at least BW 7.5 SP4, because what that does is that then activates all of the BW for HANA prep reports. So it'll tell you how close to compliance you are, and it might be 100 objects, or it might be easily, it could be 10,000 objects. You might have 9,000 objects of legacy stuff that you created, BW 3.x data flows and things, but haven't used in 10 years. Delete all of those then. Either way, once you're on the BW on HANA 7.5, SP4, or SP5, or whatever the latest is, you then get the ability to do functional conversion. That is effectively the move from the old to the new, so the move from InfoCubes to ADSOs and so forth. That is all good. It can be a big piece of work. So, where we're talking about that gray box, that you might pause on that gray box for some time, because the BW on HANA will still give you some of the benefits of BW for HANA, and you can do this functional conversion bite size. So we'll see that as we build out the roadmap plan. Perhaps your priorities are to stick on this middle version for quite some time. Don't worry about that as long as you're on the right path. So with that in mind, let's move on to the BW for HANA analysis phase. And how that looks like, and this is our IP and our process, but this is essentially how we approach it. And so the there's sort of there are four elements that go into the hopper, the digital hopper, of you know, how ready you are, and quite simply, you know, I view it as an outside in and inside out technology and process, which is what these things are. So, you know, most importantly, what's going on around the business? You know, you know, what's actually driving the need for change? You know, as Jan will talk about in Noble, it was really the ability to get useful access to data that they'd stored. You know, we have, you know, other customers. I remember one just like, I just want a sales report. So what are you using and what's required? So that's, you know, in terms of functional readiness. Second up, I think what's in use from a tooling and user experience perspective. So there, you know, there are tools that continue and you can continue to use. You can continue to use Webby or Analysis for Office. But if you're using the Web Application Designer, or if you're using the Report Designer, perhaps, or any of the tools that have been made obsolete in BW for HANA, particularly Beck's Analyzer, you're going to have to need to move them to different and more modern tools. And whilst you might be going, oh no, the end of Beck's, you know, the reality is that one of the reasons why BW remained so complex was because it just had so many options and choices. So I applaud SAP for telling us which tools they want us to use. The third piece, sizing and cleanup. I mean, I've seen BW systems that have got so much junk in them. You know, if you're you know, a Fortune 10 customer, then you might expect to have a 50 terabyte BW system. I've seen customers of a fraction of the size and business complexity that have massive BW systems. And why? Junk, old data, lack of cleanup. And this data costs money, even on an Oracle system. I know disk is less expensive than memory, but data costs money. So have a cleanup, delete data that's more than 7 years old. It's only a legal liability anyway. And then do a sizing to see how big you think it is it needs to be by the time you cut out all of the duplicate objects. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Migration approach. Speaks for itself. So we need to look at how it fits into release management, in particular, testing and regression requirements. And this is what defines the project timeline more than anything, the number of systems, testing requirements, and how it fits into release management. Anyway, that gives us the input into the roadmap. And I've got one more slide before I hand over to Jan, being reminded that I'm a minute over time. We have, and we do that last piece in like a 4-hour workshop. From that, we move into a deep dive analysis for digital core, and we typically do this across BW for HANA and S4 HANA, and we take all of those across the organization and platform, and we build that into a roadmap and a project plan and a business case. And benefits document for the organization to sign off. And we can get into some more detail of that into the questions, but I know that I wanted to hand over to Jan, who has, let's say, a guy with hands-on experience in the BW for HANA platform, and he's going to tell a little bit of the story that we did for SAP TechEd of last year, where we took Noble's system and modernized it onto the BW for HANA platform. So with that in mind, thank you so much for putting up with my croaky voice, and I'm going to hand you over to Jan, who is going to talk to us about Noble. Thanks, Jan.
Thank you, John. I will now take you through the Noble Corporation's journey of modernizing your business warehouse with BW for HANA. Now, on that first slide, you see what Noble Drilling is about. It's actually one of Noble offshore drilling units there. And Noble Drilling is one of the largest offshore drilling contractors for the oil and gas industry in the world. And, well, they wanted to modernize their business warehouse. And they had some very specific business challenges, as you can see on the next slide. Some of these business challenges were somewhat abstract, future-proofing the enterprise data warehouse platform. Other challenges were very specific around the query runtimes. So starting from the top, going digital. This really is about Noble Drilling, getting the confidence that the new platform is flexible enough to support current and future business cases. They wanted to trust the numbers, obviously, and they wanted to smash their query runtimes. Now, that's where HANA is famous for, but obviously seeing is believing. So especially when you see your query runtimes smashed with your own data, that is quite impressive. System availability and zero downtime, so the ability to implement new changes quickly based on changing business requirements. And then the last bullet point there is that the proof that the upgrade works, specifically in the light of what Noble Drilling had tried before, which was an in-house migration to BW on HANA, which had failed. They were now very keen to make sure they could actually pull off this upgrade. Bluefin and Noble Drilling then sat down together and looked at these challenges, and they decided on a solution which would prove these points. And on the next slide, you can actually see what that solution entailed. So first of all, there were 4 specific use cases which were pulled into the scope of the proof of concept. And these were around defining and benchmarking scenarios for reporting, but also for making changes to the system. So how long does it take to run a specific query and get to a specific navigable state? But also how long does it take to add a new data element from a new table to an existing report? So you can benchmark that and time them and assess how long it takes on the HANA platform, on BW for HANA, compared to wherever you come from. The POC Solution was a 2 terabyte HANA instance created on AWS. Now, at that time, it was the first time I ever saw something like that. I've never seen any environment created in the cloud like that, and I was blown away by it. It literally took only an hour, and if you compare to organizing a system in-house, then, well, the comparison is quite unbelievable. Now, for the Noble Drilling proof of concept, that was all that is required. What you do have to bear in mind, though, is if you don't work in isolation, if you want to hook up your cloud enterprise data warehouse to your internal system, then it probably takes a bit more than an hour, depending on how many hurdles you have to take. The proof of concept used a production copy, and that was taken from a SAP BW 7.4 system on Microsoft and migrated to SAP BW 7.5 edition for HANA, and that took 2 weeks. And then the functional conversion of deleting and converting legacy objects began before the system could be switched to the BW for HANA mode. And the last step of the proof of concept solution, the last part, is to once you have your system, to execute your test and to run your specific use cases on this converted system. Now that was the plan, and then obviously we had some challenges on the next slide. So when you start with a project like this, you plan for all these activities, and you know about legacy objects that you have to convert, but there are also surprises, even more so because we were the very first, or one of the first, who ever got their hands on a B4 system. So there were things that we know wouldn't work and needed to be converted. There were also things that caught us out a bit. What we did was we worked very closely with SAP, and we managed to turn these issues around, or at least communicate clearly to SAP what the issue was, so they could then start working on solutions for this. As John mentioned before, BW for HANA is a very new product. We have now got Support Pack 1, and that was released a couple of months ago, and you can see from that support pack that there were around, well, 29 high priority fixes and almost 400 other fixes in that support pack. And I think there's a clear message in there that you have to make sure that you stay current. So when you do embark on a BW for HANA journey, what you should plan right from the outset is, how are you going to stay current? Because just starting and updating your system every 6 months is not going to be enough. Now, on this specific slide are some of the objects which are no longer relevant in B4. This is fairly well documented, and these objects need to be converted, and at the time of Noble Drilling, some of these conversion programs were still being developed, but one way or another they have to be converted to B4 objects. Now, despite all the challenges that we had, we did deliver, or the POC did deliver, very tangible business benefits. So the benefits experienced by Noble Drilling on this slide are 6 or 7 bullet points. So first of all, Noble Drilling established a clear migration path, which is in line with SAP's future direction. John commented on database size already. We saw that at Noble Drilling as well. The query runtimes were smashed. But for me, what's even more important is that BW for HANA enabled Noble Drilling to do things differently. They could now run different kinds of query, different types of query, giving them far better insight in what was previously possible. So it's not just the faster queries, it's also the scope of what the queries can produce that counts. The time to market between requesting a change and delivering the change in a report was vastly reduced. That is on top of pretty much all the customers' wish list that I speak to. That most customers see that they really need to support the business better and service the business better, and being better able to quickly implement changes. BW for HANA is the platform that enables that. So all of that resulted into the confidence that BW for HANA is the right choice for a future enterprise data warehouse platform. that concludes the story of Noble Drilling and BW for HANA. Before handing back to John, I would like to reiterate that this experience convinced Noble Drilling that B4 really drives business benefits, and it's down to the high performance, to the ease of integration, and to the flexibility. For Noble, these benefits were really very clear and very tangible. What I also want to reiterate is that it's not just the HANA database that you'll be looking at to achieve these benefits. You will have to make a joint effort between the BI team, the technical team, and the business team to redesign some of the current enterprise data warehouse processes, the reports, and the way the business works. And it's not just putting in a new database. Okay, that's the Noble Drilling story for me. John, back to you then for more about the Bluefin approach and getting started with B4.
Apologies, guys. I think John's headset has just had a little technical glitch. Hopefully he'll be back with us any second, and he can talk us through the Bluefin approach. While we're doing that, Jan, perhaps you could answer a question for us from one of our audience.
Sure.
Okay, here we go. So, question we have here.
I just realised I muted myself. That was a smart thing to do, but...
Go. Okay,
great,
fantastic. So questions for the end, and I'll let you.
Should be all fixed now. So I want to get to the questions. So I'm gonna run through these. It's only 2 slides, so I'll run through it real quickly. My headset was causing problems, honestly. I just forgot to mute as well. So, you know, we've got a process. It's like a 3-step process. It's real simple. Step 1 is to do a half-day workshop, and we just get the right folks in a room to understand what you're going to do, because, you know, any kind of one of these programs is going to cost a little, and so it's going to need to be justified, because you're going to need to run a program. In many cases, you're going to have to buy software, and you're going to have to build a platform, either a cloud platform or an on-premises platform for HANA. You know, so you've got to set up a program for this. But that's all well. We do that in a half-day workshop where we'll strawman what a roadmap might look like for you. We should end up with a straw man in most cases. Occasionally we don't. Occasionally it's just too complex. But in most cases we have a pretty good idea of a straw man. I remember in one of these the CIO just stood up and he pointed it and he's like, "That's what I want. Make it happen." So the second, we should have a kind of common understanding of what's actually required and what a high-level plan would look like. And kind of a level of excitement of, oh man, we can actually do this. It's possible. It's achievable. So that's what we can achieve in a half day. And the guys tell me, we don't charge for that. If you guys want us to do that, that's on us. And then if we can step on to the next slide. We then, get started into a real deep dive analysis, and it's kind of it's something we time box. I've seen it done in 4, 6, or 8 weeks. Typically, really the duration really depends on the depth of it and the breadth of it. In some cases we go business deep, and we go process wide. We do everything from order to cash to record to report to procure to pay, and everything in between. And in some cases there are multiple ERPs and multiple business units. And we'll work with you to figure out the right budget and the right timeline for that relative to that. and then we get on and do it. And you know, the what those phases look like really depends. So I know we've only got 12 minutes left, so I want to make sure we get to the questions because there were a couple. I don't know, Chloe, did you want to read out the questions, or shall I pick out the ones initially to run with? I know there's one in particular that I wanted to get to first.
Yeah, please go ahead, John.
I'll just get straight to it then. So, and it was actually, this particular question was asked by two people, which is, doesn't this sound a bit like BW on HANA? You know, what's the difference with BW for HANA? You know, so when we were talking to SAP about it in the first place, we kind of all struggle a little bit with that. And part of the reason for that was that you know, to get the version 1 of BW for HANA, they really had to focus on, they removed all of the non-HANA code, and they removed all of the legacy object code and all of that stuff. So just that removal was a serious quantity of work. I think it took them 6 months to cut out all the junk out of the BW code base and fork it. So I sort of, you know, what you're feeling is kind of understandable. You know, so you can use BW on HANA, and you can actually enable the BW for HANA compatibility mode, and you get quite a bit of those benefits. So we've seen a couple of things, which is, first of all, a lot of customers running BW on HANA, they just use the old way, so they get none of the benefits. So sure, if you really focus on it, you can get similar benefits today. So that's the first side of it. The second side of it is from a platform development question, and this is really going to be visible in the next version of BW for HANA, when more functionality becomes enabled. But this is where all the innovation is happening around Eclipse, user experience, functionality, open data access. All of that stuff is only going to be available on the BW for HANA platform, and not the BW on HANA platform. So it's a good question. Secondarily, for existing customers on BW powered by HANA, is a separate license required for BW for HANA? I'm going to caveat this. You know, I am not an SAP license expert. Your account executive is an SAP license expert. So, if you want to get an answer, they are the people to speak to. I can tell you two things, which is, first of all, if you are a BW on HANA customer, I understand that like S4HANA, if you've bought either an enterprise license or a runtime license for it, you can add on the BW for HANA option at a nominal cost. It has to be a separate SKU for legal reasons, so you have to buy it. But you know, go and talk to them about that. It won't break the bank. And the second side is there are, if you're not a BW on HANA customer, there are more options now for you to buy it. And I don't want to get into the details of those because I'll just screw it up. But there are various options to buy the BW for HANA, particularly if you're not buying it for SAP data. So if you buy a BW on HANA runtime license, that's really restricted to SAP data use. And for BW for HANA, they have versions for using it as a real data warehouse. What level of business content is available? Yeah, and did you want to speak to the amount of business content that's available in BW for HANA, or did you want me to speak to that?
Thanks, John. I will give my part of the answer, which is, first of all, the business content that you have activated. So if you're coming from
if you get off mute. Yeah, so my understanding is that they're much the same business content is available as is available. It's effectively... Oh, Jan was talking. Sorry, Jan, go ahead. I can't hear you.
Right, I think, John, you need to go on a training course again. Okay, so about the business content. First of all, if you have implemented business content, if you're coming from a BW system and move into B4, that business content still works, provided it complies with compatible objects between BW and B4. What I found when I first time opened up the B4 system was that I couldn't install any new business content. So that worried me somewhat. And I am not sure at this point in time if SAP has deliberately left that functionality out, or whether we will see that functionality again in a future release. I don't know if you have any further insights about that, John.
Yeah, I mean, and as often, this is a little bit of a work in progress. Thanks, Ross. Thanks for taking the time to speak for a minute, and it gave me the time to fix my headset. So, equally, I think this is a good question here from the same guy. So, if BEX is no longer available, how do we use functionality like exception aggregation?
Is that something you want me to answer as well, John?
Yeah, if you can. Otherwise, I'll speak to it.
Okay, so I think a lot of complex logic can actually be built in the HANA virtual models in the calculation views. So where BEX-specific complexity is not available, that would be my first point of looking into the calculation view definition.
Yeah, and that's all available within the so essentially instead of BEX, you're just using the HANA Studio product to do the same, right?
Yes, you can do that in the Eclipse environment in HANA Studio, and you can build that in your calculation view and reuse it in multiple queries.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. And I know we've got 5 minutes, and we've got a couple more questions. A good question: is this the end of the road for NetWeaver? It's an interesting question. And there is a bit of confusion around this, and I suppose there's actually a bit of confusion around what NetWeaver really is. But to me, so first of all, I'll define what I think NetWeaver is in this day and age, which is it's a common SAP platform. It's a common platform for SAP products, and it consists of a kernel that runs the SAP platform and a set of objects, which are basis objects, as SAP calls them, and plugins and code that run on an ABAP platform. So, so assuming that that's our definition of NetWeaver, the answer is absolutely not. So BW for HANA is built on NetWeaver. It's actually an add-in, unlike BW, which was built into the NetWeaver platform. It's actually an add-in to the NetWeaver platform. So it's much of the same, but modernized. So ABAP is not gone, and NetWeaver is not gone. So with that in mind, and there may be some more questions. I think if there are, we'll follow up with them by email. I just wanted to thank you all for your time, and if I just saw the previous slide, which is, if you're in the UK in the 1st of March, please come and see us at the SAP Innovation Forum. It's kind of cool. If you're in the US in May, come and see us in Sapphire. We'll be there. And if what you really wanted to hear about was S4 HANA and not BW for HANA, sorry about that. I'm just kidding. We've got one of those as well at the end of March with you know, how to get on with S4 HANA. So thanks very much, Dan and Pratik, for helping out with the content. Thank you very much, Jan, for being the brains of the outfit. Very much appreciate your time, and I hope everybody enjoyed our little hour of BW for HANA.